Hi guys. Can everybody see and hear me? Can you hear me or no? I cannot hear any of you. Hold on. Can any of you talk? I want to see if I can hear you guys. Okay, I literally cannot hear any of you, so I'm gonna rejoin. Um, okay, can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you see me?
I can hear you and see you.
Okay,
Makes sense.
but thank you guys for joining. As you know, I'm Rohana Alam Khan. I'm the curator of Partition Is Imaginary and extremely happy to um, be able to talk to some of the artists of Partition Is Imaginary. Partition Is Imaginary is a multidisciplinary art exhibition that opened on August 7th and is ending tomorrow. Um, a little bit about why I decided to. Um, we have somebody else here. Okay. A little bit about how why I decided to do a show on partition. So both my grandparents, as in both my maternal and paternal grandparents, were in India when partition happened, but on two sides of India. My parents, my mom's parents were in Delhi, and my dad's parents and my dad, they were in West Bengal in Kolkata. So on both sides of my family, we experienced migration and the effects thereafter. For my father, since he was as a kid in India in Kolkata, he, I think, had a different kind of attachment to India, which obviously influenced me a lot. When I was born, and I a lot of you probably don't know or aren't familiar. So, going a little bit about my family history, my dad is also a freedom fighter. So he was actually exiled in India um, when uh, when my brother was very little, like before I was born. So partition in many ways has influenced me. From my grandparents' journey to how Bangladesh's political scenario played out to present day. And coincidentally, this is the year we almost saw an India Pakistan war all out. So, very apt, very timely. And to put this show together, it took me 5 years. So it was taking up a lot of my bandwidth. It was in the back burner, but it was there, and I was constantly thinking about it. So that's a little bit about me and why I decided to do this exhibition. I'd love for you guys who are here to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your art practice, and talk a little bit about your piece in the show. And I'm going to pick someone to go first, and it's going to be Shruti because Shruti has to leave early. Let's take it away, Shruti.
Thank you, Rohina, and hi everyone. Um, yeah, so it was about displacement and migration and generations of people living with this uncertainty about where they belong, right? It's about this partition. Even though my family or myself, or it was never been part of directly with this partition. That's why initially when Rohina reached out, I told her like, no, it will be faking me if I take part of this because you're coming with that much of history of connection with this thing. But the more I thought about it, it's like it's it's what we are carrying. It's what you are carrying, which all of us are carrying. So my piece in the show is about a very personal journey of displacement. Like as an immigrant, how I'm moving from one place to another, and how I'm living with that um, instability of the visa system and the political system of this country now, imposed by the politics and on the immigrant lives. So the works that you're seeing in the shows, the multi-panel drawing scrolls, has been done within the stretch of like 10 years when I was moving from one place to another place and documenting through direct observation of those places and then drawing from it. So all the chaos, all the uncertainty, everything is there in within layers, and multiple spaces and multiple moments been layered within this drawing. So sometimes you'll be seeing in one of the panels, the upper part of that panel is New York and the lower part is Seattle. So all these different places I have lived and all those anxieties and the displacement I have experienced, and asking this question like, where do I belong? And that question is still prevalent. It was a question what our grandparents, great grandparents have been asking at that moment, and what we are experiencing and asking now. So these drawings are asking that those questions like many migrants ask, like, where is home, and what does it mean to belong when belonging itself is precarious? And thank
Thanks.
you, Elena, for thinking of me to be part of this show.
Definitely. It was a dream of mine to center this show on the South Asian experience. And, I've known you as a local Seattle artist, and obviously wanted to reach out to you. And I'm glad we were able to make it work, because I know in the beginning you were like, I'm not sure if my work is relevant or not. And then I told you, like, hey, if you're from the subcontinent, your work will be relevant if it's on displacement or, just finding our place in the world.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. My work is very personal. It's not at all related to politics, but in a way, my personal self is impacted and like impacted heavily by the politics of it, right? Both here in this country and in my country. So in a way, that personal self is part of this bigger self.
Okay, who wants to go next? Should I pick somebody? Shima, you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your piece?
Well, hello and good evening. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this exhibition. Thank you for all the work that you've also done to put this together. I know it's been a tremendous effort on your part, and it's great to be with this group of artists here from India and from all over the world. I am primarily a painter, British born, South Asian. The story really starts the story around partition for me starts around the movement of my own family. So my grandparents are from Gujarat. and they migrated to East Africa. We're thinking the 1920s, 1930s, maybe a little bit later than that. And then my parents being born in East Africa and migrating in early 1970s to the UK. The other part of that story is my parents were also impacted by, and my family were impacted by Idi Amin in Kenya, sort of pushing out all of the South Asians. So there's all of this history and trauma in my parents and my grandparents' histories. I'm born in South London, England, and now live here in the US. So this whole story of migration really does impact me. And, you know, even thinking about partition in terms of land history, coming from a family that has traveled so much, it's a really strange concept. It's almost sort of like this gypsy like kind of thinking and resilience in my own South Asian sort of story. The piece that I shared with this exhibition is called I Rise. It's interesting for me to find a placement in history connecting with my skin tone and the lineage that I've grown up in. So I've chosen to find a language that still leans into our my history of being Indian. And I use color from our culture to kind of communicate in a contemporary way, but also lean into my own history. I also use abstract language to note where we are, to find a way of communicating to my audience and to our audience, really through color and symbology. The work I Rise is a play on the word iris as well. So when we're looking at my work from a distance, it almost looks like an iris. And it's a reflection of us. I have these abstract forms dancing around the world, and it almost reminds me of Garba. We're at Novliti right now, and it reminds me of when we were all dancing around in circles. Really the impact that I want to have through my story and producing the work that I do is to celebrate us, celebrate our diversity, celebrate our journeys, and celebrate the colors from which we come from and that we wear every day. And I hope that has been what has been received in this exhibition. I hope that, you know, that my contribution really is worthy of our stories that we all share and we continue to produce and give to the next generation of, you know, of people that look like us. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to add. If anyone has anything else to say, but that's what I have for you this evening, and thank you for having me.
Manisha, you want to talk about your works?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I have two pieces in the show. And wait, I first need to, I guess, make sure, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I just needed to make sure. Okay, so I have two pieces. One is called Kinship Lost, and one is called Blood on the Monarchy. And they're both inspired by really stories that my parents told me and my own history. I'm Punjabi American, South Asian American. My great-great-grandfather essentially, I guess, defected from Punjab back in, I guess, right before World War II, traveled the world, ended up in the US, but at the time we weren't allowed citizenship. And so he had to hide and couldn't go back to India for 32 years. And by the time he was able to go back, his son was grown up. His wife had passed away because she had gotten sick soon after giving birth to his son. And his son had gotten married and had kids. And so the partition had happened as well. And so he had missed a good chunk of what had happened in India. But at the same time experienced what was happening around in the rest of the world. And then his family was experiencing the extremes of what was happening in India. And so there were these two starkly different experiences, but somehow still relatable, somehow still, like, I understand your struggle, I understand your pain. And so I see the partition not as like necessarily like what has happened after. It was a before and after. It was before colonization, during colonization, and the aftermath of colonization and decolonization. There's this whole history of all these myriad of time periods and eras that we have been impacted by still today and will continue to for generations to come. Literally, our bodies have evolved because of the colonization. And so I really wanted to speak to that. These are the things that I learned from my family. There's things we talked about when I was a kid and stories we talked about. We didn't just lose land. We didn't just lose pieces of culture. We lost literally kinship more than blood. We lost, there was once our Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, even Christian brothers in arms against the colonizers. Now we hate each other. How does this make any sense? And so we lost a very foundation of community that our culture was built on. And so I really wanted to really talk about that, because I think even today, like as Rowena mentioned, we saw a all-out war almost happen, right? We're at each other's throats today. But there was a time when we were brothers and sisters. And so what happens when you lose that community? What happens when the colonizer still wins today? And the result is exactly what we've seen this year. And so I think the very breaking of our culture, that very breaking of community is what that blood, unfortunately, it's also on our hands, but I see it on the hands of the monarchy. Today, that blood is still on their hands. And so I think it's time to also talk about that. I think the British monarchy don't talk about it enough. And I think that was part of the conversation I really wanted to bring to the exhibition is, part of that narrative is that we've struggled a lot, we faced a lot. And unfortunately, some of it we've done to each other, but who was the puppeteer of what we did to each other, right? Let's take a look, from a bigger picture, from the bird's eye view, and look at who puppeteered some of that. And so I hope we have more of those conversations in the future, because I think there needs to be some accountability that needs to be taken by the colonizers.
Incredible. Next, I wanna listen to Maliha talk. She's Thanks for joining us from Pakistan. I know it's super early there, but it's so cool to see you and see your studio space in the back. Tell us a little bit about your art practice and tell us about the pieces that are in the show.
Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Maliha, and it's so nice to be here. And I have seen the pieces in the show in the zine that Ruhina has sent us. But talking to you guys and listening to your accounts, it really make them come out or speak louder. So I am basically, well, I'm an archaeologist, and I turned into an artist by choice because I see so much connection in both fields, and I wanted to get into the artist headspace. So I studied art just to understand archaeology and history and culture in much deeper sense. I have two pieces in the show, and it's called series itself is called Shanacht in Urdu, which means identity, and the pieces itself are titled in Urdu Tazad and Tashkis. Tazad means conflict, Tashkis means trying to search and find meaning or answer. So, in these pieces, I have a diverse interdisciplinary practice itself. It's very data driven, but these pieces are very personal because if the series itself started when I wasn't an artist, like artist in practice, or I haven't studied art, but then it evolved when I was studying it and understanding the colors and the schemes and the way it can be done. So so my I have experienced partition, or not personally, but through my mother. Um, her family migrated from India to Pakistan, and I understood it through her lens. In Pakistan, like after partition, we have provinces and we identify ourselves in different groups: Sindhi, Baloch, Punjabi, Chitrali, Hunzik, etc., etc. And all of these things are like product of colonial time because they had the census, they introduced the boundaries, they divided us, and then we now Pakistan is like regionally divided in within itself. So my father is from a region and he knows where he belongs because his family has been living there for years. But from my mother's side, it was we were never sure. And I was born and raised in Islamabad, the capital city. So we speak Urdu primarily. And my father and mother both have different languages. My mother's languages has like she speaks Hinko, she speaks dialects that have Indian origin, but she doesn't have she never had a place in Pakistan to call like her village or home or connect to. And so does I, because I can't speak both of the languages because in my home Urdu was the major language. And I always felt this like identity dissonance within me, like where do I belong? Because Islamabad is a capital city. It was newly built. It doesn't have a history. So who am I really? And I started off with one motive that I created inspired from my mother and my own face. And I used to repeat it. I don't know why in the beginning, but then when I was doing it, it started to form certain shapes. I introduced certain colors within it. Sometimes the pieces are like the motifs itself are fighting for like appearance recognition, and it's one motive, but I repeat it, and every time it's different. So it feels like that when I move from one phase to another, I experience migration in some ways, or try to represent what my mother's families must have, or people must have experienced. And I pick colors, and I try to communicate with colors the feelings that I want to have, or sometimes it's just my headspace and my own energy manifesting itself into the pieces. So yes, so I have and met people migration. I belong to a smiley.
Is it just me or is her video stuck?
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
the video just stopped for me too
The
right now.
conflict time, I was talking to them, and even though we were very close to each other, but the
Maliha,
conflict
your
time was
video is a bit
very
delayed.
close to each.
Okay, you're back. You're back. Okay, sorry. We missed
Okay.
like the last 30 seconds.
Okay, so yeah, I was talking about the community or the faith that I belong to. It's Smileys, Al Khanis, basically. So in India, Pakistan, we both are like majorly present. I have some friends in India, some students in India as well. And when in the recent conflict time, uh, we were very close to each other, but the conflict, I think it triggered all sorts of emotions within us. And then around that time, I was still painting, and the face kind of manifest different emotions based on the need of the time, or how the people are feeling about each other. Because I used to say that we are cut from the same cloth, we are the same people. If I were thrown into India, or someone from India comes to Pakistan, they wouldn't feel any different because we are the same people. So yes, partition is imaginary. The border is the most unnatural thing in the world. So for this show, I focused on these two pieces, and I wanted to express identity belonging through the emotions that we carry within us. Yes, these things have been given to us. It's not something that we were born with. I have no idea if borders weren't there, would we still be even questioning about identity and feeling belonged to certain areas or aspects, or I don't know, maybe these things would have been categorized or boxed, or the narrative would have been entirely different. We might not have been thinking about it, but because it is there, and we are thinking about these things, so I'm trying to bring in some poetic understanding of all of it based on the experience. So it was around uh it wasn't critiquing anything. It was, my work was explaining the emotions behind all of the experiences that people might have felt or I might have felt. So yeah, that was the work.
Very moving. I didn't know your family background, so that was so cool to hear about that. And it's, when I'm hearing each of you speak about why partition, like the topic of partition, drew you in, like I'm relating 100% to it. Like your experience in Pakistan is not a unique experience, because I've definitely felt the same way in Bangladesh. And I know each one of us probably have. So the poets who are in this live, I'd love to hear from you guys, because Ridhima, you're, I think, the youngest person who's in the zine. Please tell me about how you came across partition and how you were moved to write about partition. And honestly, I am so impressed by your poetry, because you're writing in Hindi, you're writing in Bengali, you're writing in English. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah, of course. First, thank you for creating the exhibition. It's probably the favorite exhibition of mine that I've been in so far. Hi, everyone. My name is Rithima. I'm 15 and I go to high school in the Seattle-ish area, about 30 minutes out. I have a few pieces in the show, but first I want to talk about why poetry. And for me, I started writing poetry during the pandemic when I had nothing else to do. We had school, of course, but it was really just a lot of time to myself. And I just started writing anything down, and eventually I realized that I liked rhyming things once in a while. I liked indenting, I liked doing cool things with words, and that's how I started writing poetry more formally. For me, it lets me sort of pack down or unpack the complexity of history through like layered questions. A lot of my works have questions that are progressively more and more indented as the work goes on. And in this exhibition, my work really focused on the question of what does it mean to belong when the land beneath you is divided by history and it's not really your choice. It's I used a lot of different elements in these poems. One of them was I used a shawl, just a normal shawl that was passed down through generations over different countries, different borderlines on these Mercator or Rockington projection maps and how that shell has changed over time. That does come from a little bit of a personal story. We have a shell in our house that's somewhere behind me, actually. It is from my grandfather, and I believe possibly even earlier on, that we have brought with us from India to here. And that's just a shell it's a Kashmiri shell, actually. It's not a shell that's traditional to my specific culture, but it's just one that my family has had for so long that was really what inspired that poem. I've also talked about different, I had a poem about the military, actually, and just what great admiration I have for the Indian military and just ambivalence of being a high schooler in the United States, but still having great ties to India. And I think the word that guided me most writing this was the word rupture. I don't believe I wrote it in the work, but for me, it was just partition, as you all probably have figured out, was not really just like a political event. Of course, it was political, but it was also like a tearing apart of homes, languages, relationships, all sorts of things. And my goal with this was to write to trace the emotional fault lines, not just the physical ones that are present on maps left behind, and to like ask what goes in those cracks. And rupture isn't just about destruction in a way. If you're thinking through an optimistic lens, it could also be the beginning of something new, something uncertain, and definitely something very, very human. Yeah, that's what I've got.
A follow-up question for you. You're like two generations after partition or something like that, right? Like 2 or 3 generations. So did your parents talk about partition to you, or how did you find out about partition?
Yeah, so for me, I actually took a Hindi class here in the Seattle area for many years, for 6 years until I graduated from there. And that wasn't my first exposure to partition, but that was definitely the first time I went very deep into partition. My parents have talked about partition at home. We have discussed it a little briefly. I've had deeper conversations with my grandparents about it since they were alive, or I think they were a little younger, but they were like there during that time, and they have got a lot of first-hand experiences, especially in recent times with more things happening around the world. There are a lot of times where my grandfather will call me and say, "Hey, look, do you remember how this connects to partition?" Also with the different things. And I've done a lot of research around that just to sort of learn more about my identity and my people and where I'm from. Especially, my family is originally from eastern India in Bengal and the surrounding regions of Assam, and that's an area that was very heavily divided after partition, from there being a West and East Bengal to just being a West Bengal, and just learning about that is something that's very important to me.
Yeah, you're from West Bengal, I'm from East Bengal. um okay, Rachna, do you want to add something to the convo? Talk about your poetry and other stuff that you do. I'm not sure if Rachna is there or not. Okay, we'll come back to her. The next question I want to ask you guys is, when you created your pieces, or say when you wrote it or when you painted it, in my case, I did all of that. Tell me about the emotions that came up. Like, name an emotion that came up, like that you would say, was what you felt the most while creating the artwork for this show. Anybody?
I'm happy to speak on this. I think for me, when I think about partition as a division and understanding where we're all coming from, it's quite interesting listening to Redeemer speaking, that I think it's about bringing us back together in some way, shape, or form, that we're always, we're still very much connected. So for me, if I'm thinking about a word, it's really celebrating our resilience and how much we as Asians, as Indian people, have really overcome a lot. And I hope that, this gives the future generations inspiration in the sense of what we've had to overcome, what our families have had to overcome. So that's my little input for you.
I think for me, what came up was, I think a lot of sadness. One of the stories that I remember from my parents was my mom telling me that there were these two sisters that were fleeing from, there were two Muslim sisters who were fleeing, and this was when both India and Pakistan side were sending each other bloody trains full of dead people. And both sides were getting angry and they just kept sending each other dead people, and the violence just kept escalating, and innocent people just kept dying. And these two innocent sisters just wanted to find their family, and they just wanted to go home to find their family. And they ended up at the doorstep of my mom's family's home, asking, like, these people, like, there's mob and pitchfork after us, we don't know what to do. And my mom's family were like, we'll take you in, no one will do anything to you, and we will take you wherever you need to go safely. And I've just felt a lot of sadness, like that kinship that was being lost. Like, they had lived in this place their whole life. They had friends. They had grown up here. They thought these people were their community, and now they're after them. And that wasn't just their story. That was a story on both sides. And that's just a lot of sadness. And I don't know what happened. My family, my mom's elders took them to the other side, to the border, and made sure that they got there safe. And we don't know what happened afterwards. But yeah, what kind of trauma that leaves on somebody. And for generations, that's just a lot of sadness, and just how it's still impacting us today. And obviously that brings a lot of anger with that too, but just how, while this was about South Asians, that just made me think about how this is a story that a lot of BIPOC people, that's all of our stories, unfortunately. And with everything that's happening in other parts of the world, like Gaza, that's literally being repeated. And so I think it just brought a lot of sadness. But the fact that it's being talked about, that there's a space for us to talk about it and to potentially be able to heal, because we're talking about it, because we want to prevent it from happening again, I think brought that glimmer of hope for me.
Maliha, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah.
What emotion?
So when I was painting them, it was more sort of a question, and I was lingering on why did it happen? Like, and there was a lot of anger in me, and it came out in title more tazad, like conflict within me, like why did it happen? Should it happen? Because we have been studying a very nationalist perspective of history in our education system. Like it justify all of that in some ways, two nation theory and etc etc. So, and then because the conflict recently happened, and I was thinking about like, why are we still doing it all? Why is there the hatred? Why is there the verbal violence against both communities? And spaces, this exhibition and other spaces allow that dialogue. Even in SWAS or even in Dubai, we are engaging in that dialogue, but within the region, it's still, you can sense all of that. So all of the, and that's why I think all of the faces that I've created is facing the audience. They make a eye contact with the audience, trying to communicate the feeling like, are we still doing it? Asking you and us all the questions that what is happening. Think about deeply the trauma and everything that we have carried already. So are we resolving it or not? So I think in the pieces I'm trying to resolve the emotions within me, but I'm also asking, are we able to do it as a community collectively? So I think that was something that I was thinking about when I was making the pieces.
Very interesting. I was actually like, I wanted to add to that. I mean, to what Manisha was saying about kinship lost. I forgot to mention this earlier that before I saw her work, I had thought about doing a similar painting because my nanu, my grandmother, she had a Sikh friend when she lived in Delhi. Like they were neighbors and they were best friends. And my Nanu, she didn't really speak Hindi much because she was born and raised in Khulna in southern Bangladesh. And my Nana had he had gotten a job in Delhi. That's why he was there. So my grandmother also moved to be with him. And so yeah, so she and that Sikh girl were best friends, and one time she went off with her to Punjab for the weekend without telling my nana. So my nana was completely freaking out and worried about her, but she came back. She had the time of her life over there. So actually when I went to Punjab, I really felt that, like, I actually met a girl in Amritsar. She became my friend, and I totally, like, I was moved by my nanu's friendship with her. So when I saw your painting, so I thought about doing a painting based on my grandmother's hand and her hand, the Sikh girl's hand. But then I saw Manisha's painting and it was literally a variation of that. So it was so cool. I was like, okay, I don't need to do it, someone's already done it. um that, and then I wanted to talk about like what emotions came up for me as I worked on my paintings for the show. So one of my paintings in this show is called Ghost Train, and it's a story from it's my grandmother's story from when she was on the train going to Pakistan from India. And we've heard this story, like I had heard the story, obviously, that how the ghost trains were. If you're familiar with Partition, they were like packed, completely packed. My nanu described it as people were standing on top of each other, even like there was not any space to breathe, basically. And then because there were dead bodies in the train compartments, it just smelled horrible, and it was just a crazy time. So my grandmother actually, because she couldn't breathe, she opened the train window. And when she did that, a stray bullet came into the compartment and killed a little boy right in front of her. The bullet actually grazed her leg and it killed a boy in front of her. And everyone in the compartment started yelling at her, and she was only a teenager at the time. So she's freaking out, they're freaking out. So I wanted to paint this because my grandmother had shown this bullet wound on her leg, like when it had grazed her, she had gotten injured from it. And actually, like, this entire, like, what she went through during partition had her messed up mentally. Like, I think for 1 or 2 years she was not normal. Like, I don't know the depth of this because this was before my mom was born, so she wasn't really there to witness it. But she heard from my grandfather that my grandmother was totally messed up after partition. But how do I, so for me, in my great ambition was, okay, I'm gonna paint this scenario. which, it intimidated the heck out of me because I'm like, how on earth will I show this? Because one, it's like I wasn't there. And it's like, even if I imagine it, like, I don't know if I'm doing justice to the imagery but through my imagination. And then and like just the pressure of creating this painting. And then it was the fact that, okay, am I doing my grandmother justice through this painting? Like, I have to portray her in a way that's real. Like, I wanted to portray this entire scenario in a very realistic way, which I don't even know what I was thinking. But anyway, for me, it was just very intense doing this painting. Like, pressures aside, just like putting myself in that space, like imagining this compartment, imagining the people. And it's obviously like I'm using my imagination to think what kind of people were in it, but also just the challenges of depicting something like that, like the way my grandmother described it, as like people standing on people. If I show people like that, how will I show the bullet coming through the window, grazing her leg and killing this boy? So yeah, it was very challenging, but honestly, when I did the painting is when, like, it really came through for me, in the sense that I really felt it. Like, I really felt I was in the compartment. I felt like, um kind of like the spirit of these people, like the spirit of the ghost train. And I don't know if I did it justice or not. You guys have seen it. You can let me know. But I tried. And I will say, for me, having this space to do this painting, or just even do this entire show, be the curator for this show, and giving space to all of you to show your works, whether it's poetry or paintings or sculpture or whatever. Like, it's, for me, it's a very freeing experience. I felt light, after I did my paintings. I felt light after I had all your paintings here, and we were hanging the show. Like, I felt like a weight has been lifted off me, even now that the show is wrapping up. Like, I'm filled with a bit of sadness, because I just feel like these past 6 months I've been so hyper focused on this show. And like, since I saw you guys' work, I think it was in like back in March or April. I almost feel connected to the works. Like, I was at the gallery yesterday, and I was just thinking, like, okay, this is like the last time I'm probably going to walk around here with all the works here. And I kind of felt sad that I'm going to be mailing you guys' works back, just because I felt like it helped me be close to Partition in a way, you know? But yeah, that was my rant on the emotions. Those of you who have seen the show in person, I think, I'm not sure if Rachna has, but I know Manisha has. She was here for the opening. And Ridhima, have you been to the show?
I'm going there tomorrow.
Okay, you guys have. Okay, so Manisha, you can tell me a little bit about how did you feel experiencing the show, seeing other people's works?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go on opening day. I'm actually, I live in California, so I was able to fly over and go on opening day. And I think it was absolutely incredible seeing all of it come together. But I think not just seeing the physical paintings, but the performances, to see just all of the different South Asian cultures come together as well, I think was incredible as well. Even though I'm from the Bay Area, California, very diverse, I feel like it's very rare still to find all of our cultures coming together to be in like one space like that. And so I just felt, it just felt like really beautiful. And it also felt really nice that it felt like there was a diverse community of people coming to see the exhibition as well. I really enjoyed seeing that part and seeing everybody's work. I really loved it as well. So thank you for the opportunity to letting me see all of it on opening reception day.
Let me ask you, what was it like to see, like for me, for example, just seeing the fact that everybody else, like in the show, has been working on Partition, or, people creating artworks about Partition. For me, that was a moving thing. Was it similar for you that we were working on a similar topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think um, it's almost like in a classroom when a teacher says, don't be afraid to ask a question, because if you're thinking that question, it's very likely that somebody else has that same question. It was almost in that same vein of like, okay, I had this feeling, I had this thought, somebody else is also having this feeling and this thought as well. And so even though all of our artworks and all of our pieces were different based off of our experiences and our perspectives, and I mean, but they all came together, and I think they were all cohesive in that, like, I could read, like, I read everything and I was like, oh, like, I understand that, like, I understand that because I also um, based a little bit of my painting off of that, or like, actually that also happened in my family, or I know somebody that happened to, or somebody with who told me a story like that. And so I think it felt, I felt validating, and it felt um, very inspirational too, that we're all working on the same thing, and there's something to it. There is a there.
Agree. Um, for me, when I walked into the show for the first time after it was hung, like for me, even just like, the fact that I had imagined doing a show with South Asian artists. I wasn't sure how many artists were actually going to respond to my call for art. It was stressing me out. And I was pretty much thinking that, okay, if I don't get a lot of responses, I'm going to do a lot more, do a few more paintings. But then, I got a bunch of responses, and just going through all the work, it was so intense. Like the zine, just going through the zine, all the content for the zine, reading all the poetry, looking at all our works, reading all the statements, I was shook. I was literally shook that, our collective experiences, our thoughts, I was touched by it. I was very touched that we all created artworks on Partition. I was totally touched by that. And, then came the fact that, when I saw the show together, I was moved. I was just like, wow, like I can't believe like it really came together. There's art here from different parts of the world. And it was just a beautiful moment for me. And I loved like some of the artists who couldn't make it today. I wish they were here, but some of the works, like just the flow, like figuring out the flow of the layout of how this exhibition will be laid out. Even that, like I kind of, when I went to the gallery to talk to the lead there and the person who was going to do the hanging, the gallery assistant, um, the way I laid out the show is kind of like the first section is more historical. It's like topographical, like there's like maps, cartography, Cyril Radcliffe, we're dissing Cyril Radcliffe. It's about the monarchy. It's a more historical side. Then in the middle is it was more like it had my grandmother's uh pulkari blanket from which she's had since partition, and it had some, and then there were some in the middle. It was more or less like um it was a more pop. I feel like my works were more, a little more popish, but also coming from history to a little more of like what's happening now. The fact that India's visa process asks what's your religion, that. Then came the section of how there was a little section on reflection with the videos and the drapery, but the big wall is pretty much of the present, of how we're feeling now. Um, there's I think one of Manisha's pieces, Kinship Lost, is on that side. Shruti, who was here, her work is on that side. Also, Wafa, Sayeda Wafa Zara, her work is there. Sarah Singh, one of her works is also there. I think it's called. I can't remember what her painting was called, but I'm blanking. But hold on, it's in the zine. I'm gonna find it. But yeah, I feel like that was more of her. That was more of what we're dealing with in the present. All the feelings that of displacement, finding our identity, being on shaking, like our roots being shaken up. Hold on. This painting is on that side. I don't know if you guys can see. Here. Shima's painting is on that side too. Kind of like, what do we make from it? What do we make from this experience is where it ended. Um, yeah, here, this is the painting. On the Way to the Promise. This is Sarah Singh's work that I was talking about. Have you guys, some of you saw the zine? Any thoughts on the zine? How did you guys like it? Ridhima, have you seen the zine or no? You saw the PDF, right?
Yeah, I saw the PDF. It was really good. I liked how there was it was a nice mix of having structure and no structure, in that you would read the zine and find new topics that would really be like, wow, I really didn't think of that, and also topics that seem to naturally relate together. The art and like the poetry and all the writing, everything that was in there, it's very detailed and it's very powerful, and it took me a few weeks to actually read it. It is very long. And through that, I was able to just see how much we have in common and how much all of our communities have in common, despite being from different backgrounds. I mean, for me, different age groups. I'm a lot younger than a lot of you. And different parts of India or South Asia, just how much we have in common, how much we can relate to each other, which was really nice to see.
There was poetry in the zine that was also in Bangla. That's not by you. It was by Dalton. Did you get a chance to read that, Ridhima? And what did you think?
I do believe I did read all of it. From what I remember, I can't actually remember what it's about anymore, just because I read it so long ago. But I do remember I really liked the like syntax and like how it was structured in a way that it was there. It's not often that I see people write poetry in Bangla. Usually I'm the only one who does it, and so seeing someone else who wrote poetry in Bangla and seeing how they're structuring their poetry was very, very cool.
Yeah, it was cool to, I mean, it's cool to imagine that you were able to read it, which I hadn't really thought about. But I wanted to include Urdu poetry too, but I didn't get any Urdu submissions, which sucked. But actually, one of the other poets in here, Zara Jamshed, she's Pakistani but based in New York City, and I wish they were here, but too bad. Um, Now, any of the other works in the show that you guys were moved by or liked, any of the poems or anything you want to mention? Any of you?
I think when I'm looking at some of and I think Manisha really dug into it um, in this conversation, talking about the monarchy. It's so complex for someone like me. And I have seen works by Indian artists that really do delve into this topic. But it is complex because I mean, I did fall in love and grow up with Diana. The monarchy romanticized for me. And I learned about the partition by watching Gandhi. You know, just was it Mother Earth? Uh, there was some really big films that came out that I got to watch. So those works are really provocative. And personally, I still find it really conflicting to just the psychological shite that comes from living from our diaspora, you know, knowing that these folks are responsible for breaking up our communities. And Manisha, again, you know, something you said, I grew up with stories that we would all sit around the table and eat together before the British came. And I've never seen a world like that. Um, but I have grown up, you know, with diversity. So I grew up in with just a different way of viewing life. Um, we're all connected. It just I think, you know, just thinking about those works are really, really something else for me. No, I have that much for you.
I do feel like that piece, The Blood on the Monarchy, like it's a very different kind of collage from, say, my style of collage. But like I appreciated all the details in that piece. And actually, one of my friends came by to the gallery yesterday and he mentioned that that was one of his favorite pieces in the show, because he mentioned the same thing, that I loved reading all the little things she has put in there, all these little details. And yeah, like I feel like as a topic, also just, it's incredible. And it's not something I ever thought of, like that topic, but clearly Shima's like, that's down Shima's alley.
I've had to. I mean, I've looking at it from, you know,
Now, Shima, you got to do a take on this in your style.
oh, what of this painting? I can certainly, you know, I mean, I can just go back to the way that I grew up and never really seeing Indian art, right? And feeling starved of it from childhood. And the very first exhibition that was at the British Museum, I think I was 18 years old. It was on Hinduism. And I ran to go and see it. I ran to go and see it because I've never seen anything like this before. And I walked away brokenhearted because I realized that a lot of the stuff had been stolen. And I was 18 years old. I don't know how you reconcile that. Now I'm seeing what was ours. I don't know how I reconcile that. You know, I just, yeah. I have the catalog still, you know, looking at all of these Mongol artworks, and it was breathtaking for me, and seeing images of our goddesses and just all of that. Um, and then, you know, celebrating and really enjoying the color from these works, and, you know, going back to college, and my faculty head hated the way that I use color, and to this day I still battle with that. And I'm like, you know, I'm not going to be silenced. I'm not going to allow our culture, our history to be silenced. So yeah, it's a tricky subject because you're brought up in a country yeah, I think I'll just leave it on the side.
a
I don't
deep
think I'll ever
sigh.
find peace with this. I don't know how to, you know.
Yeah, like Maliha was also saying, like, how did we end up here? And like, where do we even go from here? Like, how is this still happening?
You know what I find really beautiful is bringing us together. The times that we can do that, the times when we can bring Hindus, uh, uh, Muslims, Punjabis, and all these other subcultures within the South Asian community, any opportunity to do that is where we win, right? That's where we say whatever's happened then will never continue. What you've done, bringing us all together, I can't say it enough. It's really something. And then also, you know, having opportunities like this, do you know how often they come by?
Never. I've never seen it in my life. That's why I had to do it. But also, I will say from my perspective too, it's very controversial because as I was planning this show, it's like, do I actually want to work with Pakistani artists given our history? You know,
But it's not ours, right? This was caused. Thank you, Manisha. Yeah. Once we start studying what happened, right, it wasn't our issue. It was caused. So yes, well done for doing it.
well, but also it not just 1947. I'm saying like 1971 for us, for Bangladesh. So it was that. And then like I was like, it was like an inner battle almost, because I knew I wanted to have Indian, Bangladeshi, and Pakistani representation, but I was also afraid of how people will perceive me working with Pakistanis in a way. And it's these kinds of issues that still affect us, and like, even just hearing Maliha speak about her experience is like 100,000 times worth it, because it's like, only when you overcome those fears will you actually find common ground. And for us as subcontinentals, we have to find common ground. Like, we cannot let the hatred win. We can't let Cyril Radcliffe win,
The thing is there's been, unfortunately, a lot of this research has been done by the Western people, by the colonizers. And so a lot of it hasn't been seen by our own people, like Stanford University, which has taken a lot of information and not given it back to Indigenous and BIPOC communities. They actually had an exhibition a long time ago. I don't know if they still do or not, but they had one open where it was literally stories from Indian elderly people and Pakistani elderly people who had experienced the partition. And it was literally almost identical. And they brought those same elderly people to the exhibition. And it is only then that they all realized, wait a minute, we were just pawns in this big giant game. And this entire time we've been hating each other. And we just realized when we're 80 that we both of us went through this same trauma. And we've been living with this hate this entire time, But it took almost like 70 years for them to come to that conclusion, And so these relationships and this hatred and this history is so complex, but it's this Western colonial system that is really it was built to continuously divide. And even when it has decolonized, it's meant to stay, it's meant to stay to keep us divided so that it can continue to exploit us in whatever way it wants to. But like, I've never seen a space like this. It's for South Asians by South Asians, and the narratives that we are talking about, the experiences that we are talking about, it's all literally it's unapologetically all of us, and so whoever is coming into the gallery, whoever is reading the zine, you're gonna have to read it in its entirety. There's no I'm sorry we're saying these things. It's like, this is how we feel, this is our experience, you're going to experience it in its fullest, you know? And I think that is an incredibly rare space for us to have. And it's been incredible and an honor to like be part of it.
I agree. What an honor to be to put together a show like this, to be able to remember our ancestors, our our grandparents, and people who survived brutal conditions to get us here. And I just want to say that I, as a Bangladeshi, like, at least I can go to India. Fine, I have to answer these ridiculous questions on the visa form, but I'm not denied entry. But a Pakistani like Zara Jamshed wrote in one of her notes in the zine that Zara Jamshed cannot visit India because they're Pakistani. And I literally cannot imagine how heavy that feeling is, considering the fact that I'm weighed down by the fact that I have to get a visa to visit India. I can only imagine how insane it must feel to be a Pakistani and to know that, hey, I cannot go to India, or for an Indian to be like, I can never go to Pakistan. This is so insane to me that I'll just never recover from this. you know so
It's not
yeah,
just about people. We can't even send anything to India directly. It's objects as well. We can't
yeah.
send a piece of fabric from this region to, like, within this region. It's crazy.
And it's like, you were mentioning like how you were taught a nationalistic version of history where, I obviously have been taught the same because, that's all we have after the break, after partition, all we have is nationalism with our individual countries, which, yeah, I'm super grateful to have my own country, and that, we're not ruled by the British anymore, or for Bangladesh not to be ruled by Pakistan anymore. um but to me, like, just like the two nation theory is the craziest, wildest thing I've ever heard, because where will the irreligious people go? Like, it makes no sense to me that how can you make a country for Muslims and a country for Hindus? What about everybody else? Where will they go? The fact that, it's just like, I can't even. But
I,
maybe we're able to think that
well,
because it's 2025.
I find that really interesting, right? And I think, growing up within a culture where I really had the opportunity, I had to kind of decide how I was going to choose to grow up. And I rejected our culture, Hinduism. The Western culture felt more freeing. I could be whoever I wanted. Now, if in answer to what you're saying, which I think is really, really important, is we need to let go of religion. We need to let go of patriarchy, and we need to move forward with seeing each other as human beings, mothers, daughters, fathers, sons. When we can get to that point of seeing each other as human beings, then these divisions no longer exist for all of us.
I
Agree.
think this is again a really big product just of like our history and everything. Even like the religion and everything. I'm Punjabi, but I'm Hindu actually. I'm Hindu Punjabi. So like a lot of people associate Punjabi with Sikhism, but like we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have Hindus. Like in one region, we have many different religions. And for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, we have coexisted. And again, all of a sudden now we hate each other. It makes no sense, you know? And so I think this nationalism, all of this, like, one nation religion. It's greed. It's all about power. It's this Western patriarchy that is really taking over, and a lot of it has to do with the way, like, our culture. It's that community structure that we had of taking care of each other is gone. It was completely crumbled, and now this is the aftermath of it. It's every person for themselves. It's greed, and it's taking over, and this is what it looks like, unfortunately, and it's really gross, you know. And some of us are living proof of, like, culture and religion and all of that. Like, region, it doesn't make sense, right? But we are still invisible to this power that is taking hold right now in the region right now.
Well, I hope we can continue to grow with each other, heal all our traumas that we've accumulated through history, and be curious about each other, and yeah, try to learn from each other versus looking at each other as enemies. And yeah, I love you guys. Thanks so much for being a part of this show. It's been incredible, like, getting to know your work and just getting to know you. And I look forward to seeing what you guys create in the future.
Thank you for putting this together, Rowena. It's been an honor, and everything you've created has been beautiful. And again, this opportunity has been amazing.
Thank you guys. Have a wonderful night. And try to, if those of you who are in town, try to come to the sound bath tomorrow. It's going to be a Desi sound bath. And I just got an idea. I'll probably do a live session while the sound bath is going on so others can join virtually. I think that'll be really nice. But I'm actually super excited for the sound bath because I feel like I need it after the show. It's like the perfect ending to, like, I wanted it to be a collective healing experience, this entire show, where we express everything we need to express. And now that we've done that, let's, relax with the sound bath and say goodbye till the next time. So yeah, thanks guys. Bye.